Welcome to the France 24 in Centrale Milano news broadcast for Thursday, May 8th, 2026. You can watch on France24.com, listen in podcast form via an AI chatbot, and tune in on medium waves at 1,575 kilohertz. Reporting from Nice, I am Marco Hugo Barsati. From Paris, Rachel Costa, France 24, Thursday, May 8th, 2026. France Info. President Macron presides over the May 8th commemorations, 81 years since the victory of 1945. France has celebrated today the 81st anniversary of the Allied victory in the Second World War. Emmanuel Macron presided over the official ceremony under the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, laying a wreath of flowers at the feet of General de Gaulle's statue on the Champs-Élysées before reaching the tomb of the unknown soldier. The president rekindled the commemorative flame in an atmosphere of solemnity and reflection, in the presence of representatives from veteran associations, civil and military authorities, and numerous citizens of all ages. The program included a troop review with students from the Polytechnic and the Naval School, followed by a tribute to the fallen for France. Macron signed the Golden Book and greeted the foreign delegations present. In his speech, the president reiterated that the values that triumphed on May 8, 1945, freedom, democracy, and respect for human dignity, must remain the pillars of a free world in the face of present challenges. Some stations of the Parisian subway remained closed for security reasons during the ceremony, with traffic suspended between Kléber and Charles de Gaulle Étoile. Le Monde, Copernicus. It is likely that 2027 will become the hottest year ever recorded due to the return of El Niño. The European Climate Observatory Copernicus has launched an alarm intended to weigh on collective consciousness. 2027 could become the hottest year in the history of meteorological measurements, due to the probable return of the El Niño climate phenomenon starting in the summer of 2026. According to Samantha Burgess, the strategic climate manager at the European Center for Medium-Term Weather Forecasts, the seas around the world are approaching record temperatures for the month of May, and it is only a matter of days before new peaks in the surface temperature of the oceans are recorded. The most recent projections assign an 85% probability to 2027, beating the record set in 2024. With an 88% probability of exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius rise compared to the pre-industrial era. The probability of a super El Niño is estimated at 1 in 4 by the American NOAA and nearly 1 in 3 by the European Copernicus Consortium. An episode of such intensity, combined with the already ongoing effect of climate change, could lead to devastating droughts in some regions and exceptional rainfall in others, with serious consequences for agriculture, water supplies, and public health globally. Good morning from Paris. I am Rachel Costa. I will now read my editorial. The planet is burning, and we are planning our holidays. Well, yes, Copernicus. Not the great Polish astronomer, but the European satellite system that at least has the privilege of looking at the Earth instead of staring at the stars, has kindly informed us that 2027 could be the hottest year in history. Not the hottest of the last 10 years, not the hottest of the century. The hottest, always, since reliable measurements exist. This is with an 85% probability, which in the language of science is like saying practically certain, with a touch of professional modesty. But look here. The people of Copernicus also had the delicacy to add that it is only a matter of days before recording record temperatures in the oceans for the month of May. As if they were announcing that soon it will rain, and perhaps it is time to take an umbrella. An umbrella. Against a planet that is heating up at an exponential rate. There is something almost moving in this procedural optimism. The problem, dear people, is not El Niño. El Niño has always existed. El Niño is an old natural phenomenon that occasionally reminds us that the Pacific Ocean has its whims. The problem is that now El Niño is moving over an already feverish planet, like a spark falling not on wet grass, but on a pile of dry straw. And then a spark becomes a fire, and a fire becomes a catastrophe, and a catastrophe becomes an emergency, and an emergency becomes a newspaper article that we read over coffee, and an Instagram notification, shaking our heads thoughtfully. But no, the political response, in France, in Europe, in the world, continues to be to set distant goals, sign solemn declarations, and then allocate billions to productive sectors that have not yet decided whether climate change truly affects them. People talk about 2050, 2040, 2035, but Copernicus is talking about 2027. Less than 12 months. It is not a strategic horizon. It is tomorrow. Science has done its part. Scientists have measured, calculated, modeled, and warned. With Benedictine patience and a good dose of repressed frustration, they have delivered the data to us. The rest, as always, falls to us. And for now we are planning our summer holidays. Today's koan. A monk asked Yunman, "The planet is burning, how do we put it out?" "With rain," Yunman replied. "And what if it doesn't rain?" the monk insisted. "Then with tears," Yunman said. The monk remained silent, then said, "But tears are not enough." Yunman looked at him for a long time and replied, "That is why I told you, start with the rain." Now let us return to today's news. BFM. In Moscow, the May 9th parade will be held without tanks. Ukrainian drones changed the victory parade. For the first time since 2007, the military parade on May 9th in Red Square in Moscow will take place without the traditional display of heavy weaponry. The decision, confirmed by the Kremlin, is linked to the concrete threat represented by Ukrainian drones, which in recent weeks have conducted increasingly deep incursions into Russian territory, including the periphery of the capital. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov admitted that there is undoubtedly a certain nervousness in the city, while assuring that President Putin will deliver his ritual speech and that the ceremony will take place regularly. Numerous regional parades in other Russian cities have been cancelled for the same security reasons. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has explicitly warned foreign leaders invited to Moscow, defining the desire to attend the ceremony as a, quote, "a strange desire," with an unspoken reference to the risks that might be involved. The Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has declared that he will participate anyway, despite the pressure from European partners. Le Figaro, Zelensky warns a strange desire to go to the Moscow parade. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has sharpened the tone of his statements regarding the participation of foreign leaders in the May 9th parade in Moscow. "It is a strange desire," said Zelensky, in a message implicitly addressed to the heads of state and governments invited by the Kremlin. The warning came as Kyiv multiplied drone operations over Russian territory, signaling a clear capacity to strike sensitive targets even near the capital. The French Ministry of Foreign Affairs reiterated that no representative from Paris will be present at the Moscow ceremony, in line with the position of NATO allies. The tension surrounding the May 9th parade reflects the overall state of the conflict, which enters its fifth year without immediate prospects for negotiation. France Info. Hantavirus on a cruise ship. 3 deaths. European passengers isolated. An outbreak of hantavirus aboard a cruise ship from Argentina heading to Cape Verde has caused the death of 3 European passengers and has put health authorities in several countries on alert. The WHO specified that this is neither the beginning of an epidemic nor a hantavirus pandemic, trying to avoid panic, but confirmed the seriousness of the cases recorded aboard. According to an epidemiologist interviewed by French media, the passengers might be subject to a 6-week isolation period upon disembarking, while authorities assess the scope of the contagion. Hantavirus is mainly transmitted by rodents and rarely spreads from person to person, which makes large-scale propagation unlikely. However, the case has reignited the debate on health measures aboard large cruise ships, closed environments where epidemiological surveillance remains complex. BFM Business. Le Cornu, no magic money. The government closes the door on extra subsidies. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu firmly reiterated that there are no additional financial resources to meet the demands for spending that are multiplying from every direction. There is no magic money, he declared, in a formula destined to become the involuntary motto of an executive caught between pressure from trade unions, expectations of ministers, and the surveillance of financial markets. Lecornu's position comes as the Moody's agency maintains France's sovereign rating at Aa3 with negative prospect, TS, while recognizing as positive the budget agreement reached by the government and the prospect of a slight reduction in the deficit in 2026. The Secretary General of the CFDT accused the government of spectacle politics, pointing the finger at the symbolic initiatives of figures like Gabriel Attal or Le Cornu himself, which are judged insufficient compared to the depth of France's structural economic problems. Le Monde, the war in the Middle East could cost France €6 billion. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East risks translating into a direct cost of at least €6 billion for the French state coffers, according to a letter sent by Prime Minister Le Cornu to the government ministers. The calculation takes into account the impact of the conflict on energy prices, exports, and France's defense commitments in the region. In a medium scenario, the surplus of spending is estimated at over $3.6 billion for the current year, bringing the overall debt weight in 2026 to €64 billion. The governor of the Bank of France, François Villeroy de Guilhau, has, however, sought to reassure the markets, stating that the country's economic growth should continue despite uncertainties. With a GDP expected to grow between 0.3% and 0.9%, depending on the scenarios. A narrow margin which leaves little room for unforeseen events. France Info, May 1st in France. Tensions in the streets, squares filled with hundreds of thousands of people. May 1st, 2026, saw demonstrations among between 100,000 and 150,000 protesters in the main French cities, according to data from the authorities. The marches, organized by a coalition of trade unions, expressed deep social unrest, inflation eroding purchasing power, stagnant wages, growing precariousness, and a political horizon perceived as increasingly distant from the real needs of workers. Some marches saw episodes of tension with law enforcement, particularly in Paris and Lyon. The Secretary General of the CGT spoke of an exasperated country and asked the government to open an urgent negotiation table on wages. The day revealed a growing rift between the government's narrative of an economy in gradual recovery and the perception of those who cannot yet see that recovery in their paychecks. Le Figaro, Mélenchon candidate for the 2027 presidential elections, the left polarizes. Jean-Luc Mélenchon has officially announced his candidacy for the 2027 presidential elections, relaunching France Insoumise as the dominant force of the French radical left. The news immediately provoked contrasting reactions. The European parliamentarian Nathalie Loiseau of Renew Europe stated that her election would destroy the European project, exactly as the far right would. In the moderate left camp, Mélenchon's candidacy further complicates attempts to build a progressive alliance, capable of holding up against the center-right and nationalist movements. On the right, the name of Prime Minister Le Cornu circulates insistently as a possible establishment candidate, while Marine Le Pen remains awaiting judicial developments that could still condition her participation in the race for the Élysée Palace. BFM, Bison Fouté sees red. Traffic nightmare for the May 8th bridge. The Traffic Information Center Bison Fouté has classified the circulation on the entire French motorway network as red on the occasion of the long weekend of May 8th, a public holiday that falls this year on a Friday, creating a 3-day bridge that is highly sought after. Forecasts indicate particularly critical queues on the Atlantic coast, in the Rhone Valley, and along the Mediterranean coast, with departures recommended in the early hours of the morning or after 8 o'clock in the evening to avoid traffic peaks. Vinci Autoroutes has estimated that about 4 million vehicles will enter the roads between Thursday evening and Saturday morning. Public transport services are also recording disruptions. The RERB is interrupted between Paris Gare du Nord and CDG Terminal 2 until May 10th, with repercussions on travel to and from the capital's airports. Le Monde, French patrons focus on international markets. Internal uncertainty pushes toward foreign markets. A recent study reveals that 56% of French entrepreneurs have chosen to invest primarily in international markets during 2026, compared to 36% who had made the same choice the previous year. This data, collected from a representative sample of company executives, photographs a growing disillusionment with the domestic market, perceived as unstable fiscally, regulatorily, and politically, tension with social partners, the permanent debate on fiscal reform, and the uncertainty related to the approach of the 2027 presidential elections are pushing many companies to look elsewhere, toward the United States, South Asia, and African emerging markets. For France, which has built part of its prosperity on exports, the signal itself is not alarming. But the tone with which entrepreneurs explain their choice suggests less a strategy for expansion and more a flight from domestic complexities. France Info, French police under investigation for shooting migrants near Calais. French police agents have been placed under investigation for voluntary violation of human rights after opening fire on a migrant boat in the waters near Calais. The incident has caused immediate outrage from humanitarian organizations, which have been denouncing for years the conditions under which surveillance of the stretch of sea between France and the United Kingdom takes place. According to witnesses, the agents used firearms in an attempt to stop the boat, causing injuries aboard. The Ministry of the Interior has confirmed the opening of an internal investigation, specifying that the exact circumstances of the intervention are still under the inquiry of the investigators. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch associations have called for immediate clarification and evoked a possible violation of international conventions on the protection of asylum seekers. Online, on X and Mastodon, on all smart speakers, and on medium waves. This is Nice24 with Centrale Milano 1575 cycles. An appointment soon with the weather, always on these frequencies. France, May 8th. Macron, commemorations. El Niño, Copernicus. Climate, Moscow. Parade, Zelensky hantavirus. Le Cornu, budget, Middle East. Mélenchon, Calais, migrants. Traffic.